Hour 2 of Overdrive on TSN 1050 and up on TSN 4. Mark Rowe hanging in for Brian Hayes this week alongside Frankie Corrado and Jermain Franklin, who, again, this is your debut on TSN 1050. You're doing great. I would say, and it's true, you have the voice for the radio part, but when you dress like that, man, like you've nailed the TV part too.
It's t-shirt next time, baby.
No, you look good.
Yeah, you look good. You never look bad, though. I see you in the mornings. You're always looking good. It's nice to have you here.
Oh, thanks, man. It's good to be here, man. This is outstanding. I could do it again, that's for sure.
All right.
Well, I don't have that call, but
I'm surprised they asked me back.
Yeah, work your magic. Work your magic, Rosie.
So here we are, what is it, July 15th. Yeah, we said in the first hour, a lot of times you call it dog days this summer, but with Copa and Euros and the Olympics, like it hasn't really felt that way. The Open Championship is this week. As a hockey player, like what would July 15th mean to you? Now
would be, you would have just started getting on the ice maybe a couple weeks ago, so you're starting to maybe take that a little more seriously. Mm-hmm. The gym is basically in full swing, like you're doing your hardest portion of your lifts until the end of the month. And then once you get into August, you're probably not lifting as much weight-wise. You're getting into more of the speed kind of, getting ready for the season, that kind of transition. But this is, the dog days of summer is applicable to being a hockey player at this point too, because the workouts are long, they're intense, they're heavy. Now you're starting to skate more. It's like a little bit of a transitional period in your summer. But I don't know. I can't say that I miss that right now. No.
You're probably sleeping more when you're a hockey player than your current state, but you're not.
Debatable. I had a lot of sleepless nights as a hockey player.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. I
burning at both ends of the candle, eh?
No, I just literally couldn't sleep. Just anxiety-driven nights where you just can't sleep.
Okay.
Yeah, worried about being -3 the next day and then ensuing being -3 the next day.
Yeah.
The mental health aspect.
Everyone said being a professional hockey player was going to be cool.
So easy, too.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. There. You know what? Okay, so people will ask me this all the time now. Like, do you miss playing? And I miss the good things. I miss the feeling after a win. I miss the feeling, going on the ice for warm-up. That was always one of my favorite things to do. I don't miss being on the trainer's table. I don't miss having, an ice bag on a hurt body part. I don't miss the anxiety the night before. Like, there's actually more things that I don't miss than actually I do miss right now, which is, I don't know. Every hockey player will give you a different answer. Like, there's no two tales that are the same.
Now, you mentioned right about now, you would be ramping up the workout in terms of, gaining power before you get to the fast twitch or whatever the proper terminology is. But have you ever had teammates or acquaintances or fellow guys that just didn't feel like it? And you could tell late in August, you're like, dude, you're in trouble.
Yeah. You could tell when a guy kind of got persuaded to go on like a 2-week vacation right in the middle of summer and didn't pack their workout clothes for that.
Right.
You could tell in training camp, you're like, that guy's, he's a half step behind, or, you're seeing, where you really see
breathing heavy.
The conditioning skate. Like all these coaches have different conditioning skates. Like the guys in Ottawa with Travis Green going in there, say a prayer, man, because that is going to be no joke what he's going to put them through. That is borderline violent. That conditioning skate that he makes them do. But you know what? It weeds out really like who was really prepared for camp and maybe who wasn't, and who's really willing to dig in, and who's going to fall a little bit short. It's a good character revealer when it comes to those types of tests.
I'll never forget you saying this. I'll never forget when Bob Hartley took over in Calgary. It was basically Jay Feaster's last shot, and he went with a guy that he trusted. Feaster won a championship with Hartley in Hershey. So Hartley comes in second half of the year, and he starts skating these guys. And they were struggling. Like the Flames as a team.
Worse than Mike Keenan?
Worse than Mike Keenan. Worse, right? And like after a couple of weeks, we just be like, Bob, how would you assess the team? And I'll never forget this answer, because he's like, I I can't say, and I will not say how good this team is or could be, because you can never be at your best when you're out of shape. So he basically said the team was out of shape. and he's like, and we will never know until I get these guys up to snuff.
This is a team that probably would have had Iggy. Would have had some.
So this would have been like good Flames teams.
No, this was bad. Actually,
no,
Iggy got traded. Iggy got traded by Feaster. So this was,
okay.
yeah.
Was this Hartley's second go around? Iggy. Like, was this when he got into the fight with Torts? Like, are we talking that era of Hartley?
Yeah. But it was one. But he came in late the following year. Feaster was gone. Treliving took over, but the work ethic was still there, and they made the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs the year after, but the point is, I would trust any Bob Hartley ran team to be in top shape.
Yeah.
Mentally, not necessarily, because he played mind games, but if you talk physically and if these guys could skate and if they were in shape, I would trust his team.
You can't hide as a player because everyone's watching the players in those bag skates, and if you're lagging far behind, everyone will know. I think the goalies...
I was going to say, if you're a goalie, can you hide?
The goalies can hide it a little bit because no one really knows how fast a goalie is supposed to skate from point A to point B. People don't know how fast the goalie is supposed to get in and out of the butterfly and slide from side to side. So if you're a goalie... But you can find a way to get by, I think.
They make great analysts, though. And joining us now on the Maple Toyota Hotline is a former NHL goaltender, Carter Hutton, who was never called a slacker. No one ever indicated you were out of shape, right?
Well, I was never good enough to be out of shape. I had to hang on by a thread all the time. So, we were bad bag skaters. The worst part was when they started using too much. They started getting too smart. When we used to skate laps and skate lengths with the team, it was easy. And then when they made us start doing movements, I remember going to Nashville, Mitch Korn, he'd have the stopwatch out, making me work. It was the worst thing that ever got created by a goalie coach.
Yeah, when you would do the skating portion, if you're just skating laps or skating up and down, was there a little deal with your goalie partner? Like, listen here, we're going to skate side by side and no one's going to look like they're falling behind because these idiots don't know how fast a goalie's supposed to skate.
See, Frankie, you get it because you were there and you were probably mad at the goalies because we were dogging it. And yeah, there was always a deal. You never look too stupid with your partner. So unfortunately, certain goalies I could outskate, but I remember skating with Pekka Rinne. He'd take one stride to my three. So that was always tricky when we would get skated together.
Yeah, big goaltenders. And it's like you always hear about like NHL players being in such great shape, and then like Noodles will be like tell the story of like, I would eat popcorn at this rink, and Montreal would slide me a hot dog when I was on the bench. I'm like, you're a professional athlete. Like
that's maybe even more impressive. The fact that you could do that and then still perform at a high level.
The league.
Yes.
High metabolism.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, there was times when I always used to joke that it was the hungriest position in sports. I remember when I first kind of came up to the NHL, I remember being with Ray Emery in Chicago, and he'd always come in with a foot long from Subway because he'd be like, kid, you're going to have to learn. By the second period, you're going to need something to eat. So, God rest his soul. He taught me a lot. He taught me a lot making it to the NHL.
Wow. All right. Well, it's great to have you on the show. This is the first time that I've been able to chat with you since July 1st. So let's get your thoughts on what has happened so far this offseason. Let's start with Toronto. I know, surprise, but the big deal, which was Mitch Marner getting traded for who knows what, hasn't happened, probably won't happen, but what are your thoughts on what the Maple Leafs have done so far since the offseason kicked off?
Honestly, I think everything they possibly could have done in that, right? You wanted possibly a bigger splash or a bigger name, but it's hard when your hands are tied a little bit, right? In the sense of they have so much money tied up in guys, and it's about the best they could do. Now, for Anthony Stolarz coming in, he is a guy who played on a very good Florida Panthers team, and he had a very good season last year. But I also believe he hasn't really been tested to the sense of jumping up from, staying in those mid-20 games. And now, if he gets called upon, if Joseph Woll goes down or where the fit is. And on the other end, for Joseph Woll, this is obviously his chance to kind of have the keys to the castle with Samsonov gone and Stolarz kind of coming into that 1A, 1B situation. Now it's just going to be a matter of if he can stay healthy or not, right? This is the test, and I think everybody's up in arms, a little bit nervous about it because of his history. But I also think Joseph Woll, it's a small sample size of what we've seen in the NHL, but he definitely has a higher ceiling, I think, than anyone, the Leafs have seen in a few years here.
Carter, talk to us a little bit about the dynamic for a goalie like Stolarz, who has been a backup his entire career, but he's been really good in that role. Now he's going to be asked to do more here. Like, even if Joseph Woll is healthy in that tandem situation, that's going to be more than he's been asked to do throughout his entire career. And we've seen example of guys who have been really good backups, who get the keys to get to be starters, and they almost plateau a little bit. Like, I can think of a few examples of guys where it's like they never really took that full step. Like, how hard is it going to be for Stolarz to go from pure backup to tandem guy to maybe Joseph Woll gets hurt and it's like, now it's your time to shine in Toronto?
Yeah, and you're talking to the right guy, right? I spent few years as a backup in Nashville, and then again, when I was in St. Louis, I didn't play a ton of minutes, and then I played 35 games, had my career year, went to Buffalo, and then my workload went through the roof my first year, and for me, it was tricky, and I think this is something Stolarz is going to deal with as well. You're a bigger guy, and you work hard, you play, you compete, especially when you're not getting a lot of time. It's almost like you can mark the calendar and you know when you're going to play. So you set up your practices, you set up your nutrition, you set up everything to play that game and be peaking at the right time. Where now all of a sudden you can throw that out the window. If you're getting 3 or 4 games a week, the mental demand, the physical demand goes through the roof. And now the way that, as a backup, you used to prepare yourself in practice and kind of strategically set yourself up, it goes out the window. It's about playing games and playing well in those games. So I think it's going to be an adjustment for him. But I also believe at the same time, he's done a great job of building a good base to get to this point, and he's very worthy of this opportunity. But it's definitely going to be a change. And I think for me, it's the way he manages, in the gym, on the rink in practice, setting himself up to make sure he can peak for games.
Carter, Jermain Franklin here. Just to jump on what you were just saying, what is harder when your workload is increased? Is it the mental game, or is it being prepared physically each and every night, or at least every other night?
Honestly, Jermain, for me, it was mental. Like, I just feel like physically, the way we practice, the way we prepare, you make adjustments, right? But the mental side of it is where, say if you have a tough game and then all of a sudden you got to get back out there and play again, right? It can kind of start to snowball. And we've seen that a lot with guys, right? We saw it with Samsonov this year where it's almost like the games start piling up on you. And vice versa, when things are going well, you just want more starts because you're in a rhythm and everything seems easy. So it's when you hit those hiccups and you struggle a bit, I think that's where the biggest test is going to be, especially with this Toronto tandem where you have 2 guys who, realistically don't have a ton of NHL experience. And now you're playing in the fishbowl of Toronto and the pressure that comes with this. So I feel Joseph Woll is built for it, but I think Stolarz is going to get a wide awakening to, what Toronto is like and what the Toronto media is like, especially coming from Florida.
Carter Hutton from Daily Faceoff and also SiriusXM joining us on Overdrive. And your former backup is definitely no longer a backup, and the Ottawa Senators are hoping that he carries the load big time for them, and that's Linus Ullmark. And similar to what you just said about Anthony Stolarz, he's coming from a good team with good structure, obviously put up career numbers a couple years ago, winning the Vezina. It was the duo between him and Jeremy Swayman that was so good. How can... Ottawa's been trying to search for that goaltender for years now. Why is he the guy that can finally change that narrative for them?
Honestly, I truly, if you asked me this 5 years ago, I might have been a little bit suspect on Linus and just his maturity and the way he carried himself off the rink. But I think the best thing that happened for him was going to the Boston Bruins and being immersed in this culture where it was unacceptable to, take days off and to not carry himself well. So I feel like he's grown a lot and matured into, just a pro on and off the rink, right? He's always been so talented. And I got a lot of buddies that always, when he won the Vezina, I feel like a lot of guys were texting me being like, hey, you called this. And I don't want to act like I knew it, but he was so good. Like, there'd be nights where we'd be getting smoked in Buffalo, giving up 45 shots, and he's so in the game, and he'd come to the bench, and he's so casual. It was like nothing was going on, where I'm 10 minutes into the first period, and I'm already 4 pounds down. I'm sweating my butt off trying to work to keep up. So he is a guy, he's always had that. Like, his ability is through the roof. But I found he struggled a little bit. I think this is a product of just Buffalo, years ago, where even Jack Eichel and Reinhart, some of these younger guys, where they kind of gave the keys to the castle in Buffalo to everybody. They gave them everything they wanted without earning it. And I think when Linus went to Boston, got immersed in a little bit stronger culture with some more veterans, it really helped him grow as an individual. And I think his game is built now to go on a team where it might not be as good defensively as it was for the Boston Bruins, but he has the skills now, I think, mentally and physically on the rink to help this Ottawa team, improve. I think the playoffs are a bit of a stretch, but I also think he could be a guy that makes a lot of noise this year in the NHL.
I think I know where you're going to go with this answer, but I'm going to ask anyways because someone asked me this recently, and I thought it was a decent enough question. Who should want an extension done more, the Senators or Ullmark? Because if you kind of look at the way the goalie thing has gone for them recently, it was Matt Murray who won 2 Stanley Cups. They had to move off from that. Cam Talbot, they moved off from that. Korpisalo, good goalie. They had to move off from that. Ullmark is a Vezina winner. All accounts would say he's going to be very good there. But, who should want that extension done right now more, Ottawa or Ullmark?
Truthfully, for me, I think it's Ottawa, right? I think guys like Linus Ullmark are hard to come by. I think when you talk about going to free agency and finding a guy like this, right? So if you move on from him, what is your next play? Who is your next guy? That's got to be very calculated. And for Linus, I think he holds all the power here, right? Obviously, it's going to be very, statistically based how he performs and where it goes in free agency. But one thing I can tell you about Linus Ullmark, we had the chance to have him on the other day for an interview, and I've got to know him very well. His wife and our kids went to daycare together in Buffalo, but he's a family man first, which is, I think, for some people tricky to understand, right? They talk about why he didn't want to go to LA or Toronto wasn't on his list to go because he doesn't want to go to a big market where there's more pressure on his family. And I think Ottawa's going to be a great fit for him in that sense. Is obviously if hockey goes as planned, he's a guy who wants to prioritize his family. He doesn't really want to be in the limelight in that sense. So I feel like for him, there's a lot to gain going to this market. And for the Ottawa Senators, you instantly get a number one goalie that can make your team better.
I was talking to Marty Biron, I guess, a couple of weeks ago now, and I guess I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit. But the question that I asked him was who in the West or what Canadian team actually has the best chance of going deep into the playoffs next year. Clearly, a little ahead of time. But the whole point that Marty said was, first of all, he picked Vancouver. And second of all, no surprise, he picked Vancouver because of Thatcher Demko and what they have, emphasizing that he wasn't healthy in the playoffs and they still played well. What are your thoughts about Vancouver? And obviously, we all know, but to stress the importance of a goaltender you can count on literally 60 nights a year.
Demko is one of those guys for me that is knocking on the door of being one of the elite, if not one of the better goalies in the whole NHL. His knock is, just staying healthy, right? At times he plays a very dynamic and explosive game for a big man. He moves very well. Even that first game when he came back in the playoffs, he made that backdoor split save, blocker save. That's stuff that most guys at his size and, aren't really capable of that. Even you watch a guy like Connor Hellebuyck move in the net. He doesn't really make saves like that. He's based on being deep, letting the game come to almost a boring style of game when it comes to, goaltending in that sense. I think for me, having Sheelovs there as well to push him in the sense of, getting a guy that's there where in years past, there's always been that backup who's, Casey DeSmith was there. He was just a straight up backup where now you have Sheelovs. I think for him, it's going to be challenging this year. You go from being the guy in the American League playing a lot of games to now you're in the NHL, and now your games might be a bit spotty when you have a chance for, Demko to play more. But I also think strategic by management here, when you look at successful pairings, I think over the last few years, if you're going to say who's been the best tandem every year, it seems to be Boston with an Ullmark and a Swayman. So now you have a situation where you have Demko and you have Sheelovs where you can kind of find that 1A, 1B rotation, maybe give him a little more rest when you have a chance, where instead of having a guy that is strictly your backup, you have two great goalies that can kind of be your platoon to push you into the playoffs.
If you were Team USA and you're going into this Four Nations Cup, and keep in mind it's going to be one game eliminations, would you be surprised if Thatcher Demko was the goalie that got the ball? Considering that it's just one game, whatever you got in that one moment?
Yeah, I guess I would be a little surprised. I think maybe because of Connor Hellebuyck's track record. He's a guy that, has that repertoire and he's played so many big games and important minutes. But for me, I think it's going to be who can get it done at the right time. And it's funny sitting here before this Four Nations Cup now talking about the United States goalie, and we start questioning our own goalies here in Canada, right? Where, the United States has a plethora of guys to pick from, right? You think of their top three, Hellebuyck, Demko, Ottinger, any of those guys are probably the starting
Swayman
for Canada.
Swayman could be in there too.
Right?
Swayman,
another one. The list is insane, right? Where you talk about Canada, I think any of those four they're the starting goalie for Canada, right? So it's just, where they're at right now. And this is definitely the first time, I think, for me, since I was a kid, we look at international play, and I don't think we're that confident in who our starter could be, and if that, who is it going to be?
So who is it?
I think right now maybe you go with like Skinner or Binnington, because they have a little bit of history. Aiden Hill, like those are your top three right now. I think it's going to be based on the hockey minds that are around Team Canada and who's playing well at the right time, like Frankie touched on there, right? A one-game showdown, especially goaltending, you got to go with the hot hand.
That was not a very convincing answer there, Carter.
Yeah, well, this is a tough one. I don't want to be on the spot. I guess if I had the gun to my head, I'm probably going with Binnington, just because his character and how he is. And Skinner, I think after the playoffs with Skinner, it was you never know which guy was skating out of the tunnel this year for Skinner in the playoffs.
Carter Hutton joining us on Overdrive, a guy who played 234 games in the NHL, but more importantly is probably in the Fort William North Stars Hall of Fame. Is that true?
I don't know if we have Hall of Fame. I have a jersey hanging in the.
That's good enough. That's good enough. Because my segue is future Hall of Famer Steven Stamkos is now with the Nashville Predators. He penned a letter to Tampa Bay. You could tell it was very emotional for him. We've talked so much about how, this was not the ending that anyone expected, certainly not from him. But now that he's with Nashville and you see these changes, are the Predators in that top category of teams in the West to emerge in the conference? Because they've been knocking on the door, it seems like, for a while, and they just haven't been able to get over the hump in the postseason.
Honestly, what I really love about this is, I spent 3 seasons in Nashville. It's kind of near and dear to me, right? Is where I really cut my teeth and broke into being an NHLer. And it felt like for years, they just kind of hover around making the playoffs. They never really commit to spending money and going after it. Where this year with Trotz there, a year under his belt in this team and signing Saros and just knowing they have the guys to get it done and going out and getting Stamkos, adding these players, Marchessault, Skychi, these guys that can go in there and just make a difference for this team. I just feel like it finally sends a message to the league and to their fan base that they're going for it and they're trying to stock up while they have Roman Josi in his prime, while they have Philip Forsberg, while they have UC Saros at a point where, he's one of the upper echelon goalies in the league. So I love what they've done. I love that Trotzy's just kind of going for it. And I also feel like for a guy like him, at this point in his career, what does he have to lose, right? He's a Hall of Famer. He's a guy that's been around forever. David Poile did a great job. I love that they're spending money and trying to take a chance at it.
We had Bruce on shortly after July 1st, and one of the things we were talking about with him is, if you're the coach, you probably go to the GM and you say, I want to do this, I want to do that, can you do this, can you do that? And I wonder how many times the GM went to the coach and said, can't do this, can't do that, sorry. And then that coach probably said, okay, if I ever get the keys, I'm going to do what I want to do. And it feels like that's what Barry Trotz did in Nashville. He got rid of all the guys that he wanted to get rid of. Like they moved on from Johansson. They bought out Duchesne. They kind of changed, the complexion of the team. And this year he said, I'm gonna spend some money. And now like he's kind of got his fingerprints all over that team. I don't know. Like it sends a message, from Nashville to the team and the market that they're serious. It also sends a message from Barry Trotz that like, hey, a head coach knows what he's doing and he can be the GM and he can have some serious change if he wants to on a roster.
I agree. I couldn't agree more, Frankie. So like what I always think about is, when we were playing, you play professionally or whatever level you're at, right? And there's always that disconnect, right? Where I always hated when coaches would I call it like they'd just like fluff you up, right? They'd be like, oh, you're playing good. Like, don't worry, you'll get a chance to get in there, right? Like, and you're like, and then all of a sudden you're in the press box or I'm sitting on the bench where I love the black and white of Barry Trotz, right? And I think that was something that he always promoted when I played for him. And again, I'll bring up Mitch Korn again. He was almost too black and white. Trust me. He didn't pull punches when he was telling you how you played and what you need to do to be better, right? And for me, there was a dramatic point in my career in Nashville where we traded for Devin Dubnyk. He showed up. Pekka was hurt, and me and Marek Maznik were bouncing back and forth playing. I think I was 500 at the time. Devin Dubnyk shows up. Mitch Korn, Barry Trotz have a meeting with me, and they're like, Carter, you are not playing good enough right now. You need to be better if you want to stay in the NHL. And to this day, I respect that so much because it made me take a look in the mirror and be like, what can I do to be better and be, instead of them being like, hey, keep at it, kid, don't worry, this isn't about you. And then next thing you know, I'm shipped off to the minors or whatever happens. And
you get whacked in a backdoor meeting.
right? Yeah, and then
NHL Soprano style.
Yes. Trust me.
Exactly. You know how it is, right? And now Barry Trotz is doing that as a GM. He's sending a message to everybody that this is Nashville team is for real, and they're going to try to find a way to win. So I love it and respect it. And worst case, at least they threw their hat in the ring and gave it a shot.
Wow. The amount of goalies that I've worked with who have brought up Mitch Korn is in like the double digits. And it's either the guy changed my career and he's so good to he's this eccentric guy who has all his luggage in his car and I don't even know if he has a house. And anyways, he's one of the characters and obviously one of the great goaltending coaches in the NHL. So anyways, Carter, you're becoming one of the best analysts in the game as a former goaltender. So we appreciate you taking some time to join us. Hope you're enjoying the summer, and we'll catch up soon.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
There you have it. Carter Hutton joining us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including the Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com.
I'm telling you, man, there's some meetings that happen in the NHL where you might get whacked. You think you might get whacked.
Paulie Walnuts is like around the corner.
No, because you know what they do? It's exactly what Carter said. They fluff you up for a little while. Hey, it's all good. Don't worry. Yeah. Just go out there and play your game. You got nothing to worry about. Then you get like this weird tap on the shoulder one day, and you're in like some storage closet in the bowels of the arena, and you're getting sent to the minors. And you're right next to like the toilet bowl cleaner.
I thought the television game was tough.
It's like, what are my sticks doing in here?
Why are they all
right
broken?
Next to the mop. Right next to the mop. Their sticks are in a bag.
I swear I had more stuff in my hockey bag. You're keeping all this stuff?
Yeah. Well, that's why you got to get a one-way contract.
Yeah. Gives you a little security, at least. Yeah. I've been sent down on the airplane, waking up from a nap, team services guy. Hey, Torts wants to see you up front. Like, oh, okay. Yeah.
I just lost $300,000 or whatever.
Yeah, no one's feeling bad for you, but.
No, I think it's.
Well, I would. I did. Like, I'm seeing guys like going to the dome early. If I'm on my game and I'm going to the dome like an hour before practice, maybe an injured guy's skating. So I get footage of them, and then you just see.
And you never see
dude walking out with his sticks. You're like,
and then a few years later, like, what happened to that guy?
Yeah, and they truly do usher him out, trying to. But you're there early. You're like,
Not to damper the mood here, but there really is a moment when you get sent down where you say in your head, that might be the last time I'm ever in the NHL. Yeah, and everyone has that moment.
All those practices that you went through and tournaments and leaving your parents to go starve for the Sudbury Wolves and the Kitchener Rangers and. Yeah. Now you're on Overdrive with Jermaine and me.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
You sure?
I'm sure.
You sure you don't wish you're in the KHL or just
a TSN quarter zip on? How much better could it get?
It looks great on you, man. Truth be told, we need to make sure that we don't wear it at the same time because it looks better on you.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get out of here.
It's the new green jacket.
All right, let's go to break.
All right. Well.
Way to take over, Frankie. I like this.
You want to host a show?
No, God. JP's losing it in there. He's like, we got to go.
Okay, we got to go. Something to chew on is coming up. Mike McIntyre will talk tennis at 5:40, and Jesse Marsh, head coach of your Canadian men's national soccer team, will join us to kick off the 6 o'clock hour as Overdrive continues on TSN 1050, the TSN app, and also up on TSN 4. Overdrive continuing. Mark Rowe in for Brian Hayes alongside Frankie Corrado and Jermain Franklin. When I was in high school, I had a job at Boston Pizza in the kitchen.
Oh, nice.
Best pizzas in the city, at that time at least. No, for sure. All the time.
All the time. We love Boston Pizza.
Which brings us to Something to Chew On, which is brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. Summer is short, so make sure you make the most of patio season at BP. Join us for a long lunch or a late night and see you for a pint on the patio soon. So the question today is, with the MLB All-Star Game arriving and the halfway point of the season on the horizon, do you view the Toronto Blue Jays playing in the postseason this year?
What are my choices?
Yeah, what are the options?
Yeah, there? What are the choices?
No shot, absolutely not.
I think it's a yes or no question.
Well, it's no.
Okay.
And it's like adamantly no.
Right.
Like there's no chance.
So it's like if I said, do you want to go to Boston Pizza? And you'd be like adamant, yes.
Adamant, yes.
Yes.
Equal to this except for no.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have it as a poll.
I didn't want to be the adamant no guy. I wanted to say,
you're Mr. Positivity.
Something could, I mean, what is it? 8? What are they out of the third wild card now?
8.
Oh, but here's the thing: for them to be
9.5, 9.5,
9.5 now.
Yeah.
that's insurmountable, and for them to get back into the mix, the clip that they have to play at. Gord and I were talking about it. It's like
680 or something.
Okay, it's the high sixes. No team currently in the MLB is playing at that clip. So what makes you think that this Blue Jays team?
Well, and they have to get over Texas, Detroit, Tampa, Houston, and Kansas City.
And Houston wasn't playing well earlier. Now they've kind of they've figured things out. They're back to exactly who they are.
So we have it as a poll.
That would be
on,
a no
on
chance.
Twitter or X. No, it's okay. Doogie?
Well, yeah, Doogie, explain yourself. What did you think was going to be the answer on this?
I had a feeling it was going to be no shot, but not to this extent.
Really?
It's 96-4.
Yeah.
For no shot.
700 votes.
It's not a lot on
Yeah,
it.
I did not expect that at all, to be honest with you.
So I
guys.
wonder.
Well, nothing's really going right for the Jays. That's the issue. I mean, Vladdy's playing better recently after he cut his hair, which is one thing, but you need,
that's the X factor.
Is that why?
it could be.
Okay.
It could be. But you need more than that. I mean, pitching has been disappointing, especially the bullpen.
Right, but you again,
Bo
a
Bichette
lot of this
has not
is
had a
predictable.
great season.
You knew the pitching was going to regress because it was so good, the starting rotation last year. You knew there was going to be injuries. You knew like Kikuchi wasn't going to pitch as well, and then it was all this internal improvement that you were selling everyone on.
Yeah, the hope was that the offense would be better.
If anything,
this year.
like Bichette's regressed.
Yeah,
I think
Springer, who has come on recently too, but he had
older.
such a horrendous
Kevin Kiermaier, who was on waivers, hit a grand slam last night, but you're not relying on him for offense. So
and nobody wanted him. That must be tough too. That's an eye opener. He was put on waivers and nobody.
They don't want to take that.
Yeah, it's a pretty lonely feeling, Jermaine. Pretty lonely feeling, pal.
We can break. If
it's okay. No, it's okay.
We should break.
But here's how you know it's a flawed team. When coming into the season, the hopes were that there was going to be this internal improvement offensively. Basically, you can kind of say that you made that up because you didn't go outside of maybe trying to get Shohei Ohtani and not getting him. There was nothing else that was done that was going to say we are going to be better offensively. We're going to have more clutch hitting. We're going to drive in runs when we have runners in scoring position. They didn't do anything there. So they basically, by default, said it's just going to have to be internal. And we feel like we have the guys to do it. That hasn't happened. And the rotation, which has been, very good the last few years here, yes, it was going to regress because guys were getting older. Also, guys got hurt, man. Like Manoah got hurt, Jimmy Garcia got hurt, Romano got hurt. Like, okay, those guys are in the bullpen, but anything that could have gone wrong with this team has gone wrong. And now here's where you're at. And it seems like it could be a long time until they're out of the basement of the AL East.
Yeah. With the MLB draft and the farm system being ranked at the bottom of the league, you're hoping that they can improve that area while they make some smart decisions with who they have. Kylie McDaniel, who is an ESPN Baseball Insider, is going to join us at 6:30. We'll get his thoughts on the ongoing MLB draft, which began yesterday. But coming up, Canadian tennis players are hoping for internal improvement. Mike McIntyre, host of Match Point Canada podcast, is going to join us. We'll get his thoughts on that. Carlos Alcaraz winning Wimbledon, beating Novak Djokovic, as we get set now for the Paris Olympics, the National Bank Open, and also the U.S. Open. That's coming up. Overdrive, TSN 1050, and up on TSN 4. Overdrive continuing. Mark Rowan for Brian Hayes alongside Jermain Franklin and Frankie Corrado. A great weekend. We had the Wimbledon finals. We had the Euros. Then you had Copa. Copa was a sideshow that we got into earlier. But what a performance by Carlos Alcaraz on Sunday, where I think a lot of us were leaning towards the young Spaniard as the defending champion, but it was Djokovic, right? Like, how can you count him out? And then you mentioned that first game, and that was a battle, and when he broke Djokovic right away, and he never looked back. And for Novak Djokovic to say, Didn't matter what I was doing today, he was going to win. He was the better player. That says something. And with more on what we saw at Wimbledon, what we're going to see at the National Bank Open, the Paris Olympics, and U.S. Open, Mike McIntyre, Canadian tennis journalist and host of Match Point Canada podcast, joining us on Overdrive. Mike, great to chat some tennis with you.
Boys, thanks for having me back on. It's great to be here. And I got to say, I wish Noodles was ever around for one of these tennis chats so I could tell the story of how I have a signed Jamie McLennan goalie stick in my parents' garage.
Oh, you're the person that got it. Okay. Wow.
Save that for next time.
Number one Jamie McLennan fan.
Interesting.
I like that.
So is it a flame stick? Islanders? What are we talking here?
This was St. Louis Blues vintage era when they played the Leafs at the Gardens. And my old hockey coach, Jamie Compon, who's now behind the bench with the Panthers, got me the signed stick after the game, which was kind of cool at the time.
Look at that. That was like a William Jennings Award-winning Blues team back in the day. Jamie and Roman Turek.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it was that exact season that you got the autograph, Mike, but that was those were good teams. And a pretty good performance, to say the least, yesterday by Carlos Alcaraz. You know, we saw him win in 5 sets yesterday at Wimbledon, where we weren't quite sure if he was ready to win on that surface. What did winning in straight sets over Novak Djokovic do for you in terms of the status of Alcaraz in the game at the moment?
Yeah, it shows me two things about Alcaraz. One is he's learning on the fly so incredibly quickly. His learning curve is just out of this world. A year ago, as you mentioned, it took him 5 sets to beat Djokovic in an absolute thriller. And this year, seemingly no problem at all, especially through the first 2 sets, which he claimed 6-2, 6-2. So he's only 21 years old, but he's showing just a huge ability to adapt to his opponents. And the other thing it shows me is that Djokovic, I'm not saying he's done. I'm not saying we're never going to see another major from the guy. I mean, count this guy out at your own peril. He's only a year removed from winning 3 of the 4 majors. But he is 37 years old. And, as I can attest, as I'm in my early 40s, it doesn't get any easier, whether you're playing, men's league hockey or recreational tennis like I do, or you're playing even more so at a professional level. At some point, Father Time is going to get the better of you. And I wonder if we're getting closer to that stage with Djokovic.
Do you believe that is, the passing of the torch, that now this is going to be the Alcaraz era? And I know Sinner's going to be in there as well. But, at 37 years of age, coming off a knee injury and, recovering from that, like, how much juice is he going to have left to kind of prevent Alcaraz from running with the torch now?
Yeah, well, it's inevitable at some point. And even though Djokovic is talking about how he can still get better and still improve, I mean, I love the confidence, of course, that's a champion's mentality, but at the same point, you're up against a 21-year-old. Alcaraz hasn't even reached his prime. He's in incredible shape. He can go 5 sets. He could go 10 sets. It wouldn't bother him. The guy's just an absolute beast out there. He reminds me of a young Rafa Nadal, another Spaniard. And for Djokovic, yeah, of course, he's going to try. But it does seem like the passing of the torch, and this is inevitable in any sport. I mean, we had Gretzky and Lemieux hand off to Crosby and Ovechkin. We had Sampras and Agassi hand off to Federer and Nadal, and then Djokovic came along. And, the good thing from my point of view is I think tennis is in really good hands if Alcaraz is the one who's picking up that torch. He's already got 4 majors at the age of 21. He's shown that he can handle the pressure situations. He can play on any surface. He's going to have his own Netflix series coming out next year. Netflix just announced today. So it seems to me like this guy is quite comfortable if he's going to be the one to move tennis forward into the next 10, 15 years.
Wow, Mike, you just, Jermain Franklin here, you just rattled off the stats, kind of took the air out of my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because you did mention Rafa Nadal, and you think about how young Alcaraz is. He already has 4 majors. What are we talking about here in terms of potential? Could he be the next could he be the greatest ever?
Oh God, you're asking me to play the prediction game, huh? That's a tough one, especially off the heels of these 3 greats. I mean, they're called the Big 3 for good reason. Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, they've all amassed more than 20 majors independently. And look, when I was growing up, when you guys were growing up, Sampras was the mark at 14 majors. And look at what these 3 guys have done to him. And we said at the time of Sampras, boy, who's going to be able to come along and get more than 14 majors? And now look what's happened. Are we going to see someone who can surpass that? Well, I'm not going to say no, but at the same point, you've got to be so incredibly fortunate to make that happen. Aside from being talented, I mean, the kid's got talent for sure. You've got to be, lucky enough to stay healthy for the majority of your career, which is something Federer could do up until nearly the end, which is Djokovic, for the most part, has stayed healthy. Nadal has had, his share of injuries. Imagine what he could have done if he had stayed healthy longer. But you're out there one-on-one. You're an independent contractor. There's no team. You can't take a shift off. You're out there all the time facing your opponent, and it's a grueling sport. And for anyone who's played it, it's very challenging and it's demanding, especially on the knees and the joints and the hip and the back. Look at some of the injuries our Canadians have gone through over the years with Bianca and Milos, and so you can never take that for granted, and you can never assume that you're going to be able to avoid those kind of things, unfortunately.
Mike McIntyre, co-host of the Match Point Canada podcast, joining us on Overdrive, and you brought up the Canadians, and it wasn't that long ago, Mike, that people were pointing to Felix Auger-Aliassime as being the next great player, future world number one, multiple majors. Dennis kind of in that same breath as well. I'll extend it to the women as well, but it's been a tough go, especially at the majors over the last couple of years. Who are you the most optimistic that can turn things around and go on some of those long runs that we really were spoiled and we're accustomed to for the better part of 4 or 5 years in a row?
Yeah, it's funny. We are accustomed to it now, right? And that wasn't the case, again, back in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s. And look how far the sport of tennis has come in our country thanks to these guys and girls. And we've got a core. We've got 4 fantastic singles players. You've got Bianca Andreescu, who's now nearly 5 years removed from her U.S. Open win, if you can believe that. We've got Leila Annie Fernandez, who's made the finals of the U.S. Open as well in the past. Denis Shapovalov and Felix Auger-Aliassime, who you mentioned. They've all got the talent. Part of it is staying healthy. We've seen with Bianca that when she is healthy, she can still compete with the best in the sport. And then the 2 guys are a little bit perplexing to me, and for different reasons. Shapovalov is easily one of the top 15 most talented players out there in the men's tour, but sometimes between the ears it just gets the better of him, and I wish he could kind of take his foot off the gas and take a deep breath. And on the other side of things, you've got Felix, who's like the Iceman. He's like the nicest guy I've ever met. He'll give you the shirt off his back. Sometimes I wish we'd see him get a little bit more pissed off out there, maybe throw a racket or something and let out some of that steam that he must be building and holding on to inside, because I think that might be helpful for him if he showed a little bit more of that animated personality. But the talent is definitely there. It's, I think, mostly a mental thing for those Canadians. But, hey, we're fortunate that we're even talking about this because there's so many countries that don't have these kind of talented players. And at any given major, we do have the capability to go on a run.
All that talent you just talked about, some of those players are going to make up Canada's Davis Cup team that's going to compete in September. What do you make of that team and their chances in that tournament?
Well, hey, we've shown at the team level, and maybe it's because we come from a country of hockey players and we're used to the team sports more so than the individual sports, that our Canadians really thrive in that setting and environment. We won the Davis Cup 2 years ago. We're the current Billie Jean King Cup champions on the women's side. So, I mean, that's pretty historic on both sides. Those are firsts for Canada. No reason it can't happen again. But at the same point, you got to be in good health. You got to get, hopefully a nice little draw too, where you're not in one of those pools of death against 3 other really strong nations. So that will depend. But we've got the players that can do it, and it's a mix of veterans and a mix of younger players. On the veteran side, Milos Raonic, who's back in the mix. Great to see him back playing again. Highest ranked Canadian male of all time, peaked at number 3, Wimbledon finalist in 2016. When he's healthy, he's still a dangerous player with that serve. And then you've got Vasek Pospisil as well, who I'm watching tonight actually here in Granby, Quebec at a smaller event as he's coming back from some injuries. But he's like Captain Canada on the international stage. In doubles, he can do it. In singles, if needed. And it's just a great mix of personalities, of ages, and experience. And I say the Canadians have a shot just as any of the other top nations will have this fall.
Awesome stuff, Mike. Looking forward to the Olympics, the National Bank Open, the U.S. Open. But first, Granby, where we've seen a lot of great performances by Canadians there. So looking forward to reading and hearing your work when it comes to that and the upcoming tournaments.
Hey, thanks so much, guys. Hope to chat with you during the National Bank Open. Hope you can make it out to see it live, too.
I would love that. Of course. Mike McIntyre from Match Point Canada podcast joining us. And I'll echo what he says about Milos Raonic. Great to see him still involved because retirement is coming in and he's kind of planted that seed a bit. and also that he's competing at the Olympics. And it's interesting because it's in Paris, so it's on clay, which is not his favorite surface. And he has skipped the French Open a bunch of times to prepare for Wimbledon because that is his surface. So, Milos, who knows what we can expect from him at the Olympics, but nice to see him around.
I got a question for you. So does it have to be clay for the Olympics because it's in Paris? Or is that like a decision that the IOC makes because it's in Paris? You know what I mean? Like
no,
it could
venue.
be any.
It's the city that can decide it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when it was in Rio, and they host a clay court tournament on the ATP Tour, but that was on hard court.
Right.
For the Olympics. So they can choose. I believe Barcelona in 92 was the last time it was on clay. When it was in London in 2012, it was at Wimbledon. So, the nature of the sport is it's going to be on hard courts more often than not because that's the most, most venues have that, or most cities have those venues. But it's interesting in the sense that they've gone from the clay court season to grass and now back to clay.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And Ranj, his serve is incredible.
Dynamite.
Yeah. But clay just a little bit
slows it down a little bit.
Just that
right. Like
fraction.
He did reach.
That makes a huge difference.
People forget that he reached the quarterfinal at Roland Garros. No, that was 10 years ago. But he has had success at that venue and on that surface.
It's nice to see him back.
Yeah,
he's one of those guys. He's been hurt a lot. It obviously hampered his success over the years. So it's nice to see him back.
It's always been something, and kind of Bianca's the same, where it's always lingering, and you just for her. Just a season. Get a season under your belt. A full season would be great. Because Mike's right. She's got the game to win. Canada had the game to win a lot at Copa America. Their coach, Jesse Marsh, will join us to kick off the 6 o'clock hour as Overdrive continues on TSN 1050, and we'll be up on TSN 2